Hello and welcome to the Part 2 webinar for your course Canine Behaviour Foundations. This part of your course will look at the human-canine relationship over history and the modern human-canine relationship. To start with, let's go back in time, and we know that there have been shared burial sites, so dogs and human remains found together, dating back hundreds of thousands of years. And this indicates that dogs and humans have lived side by side or in close proximity, have been a part of one another's lives for a very long time. But what is really indicative of the relationship developing is that in the last tens of thousands of years, remains have been found where the dogs have been prepared for burial in many different cultures, often in similar ways to how humans are prepared for burial. And this shows a new level of relationship developing in more recent history between dogs and humans. When it comes to looking at the actual domestication process, dogs we're pretty happy that they were the first animals to be specifically domesticated by humans for our purposes. And this ability to connect with animals is certainly contributing to humans developing three behaviour sets that are very much diagnostic of our species. So the development of tool making, symbolic communication, which will become language and spoken language, and the domestication of animals. Those three kind of define us as humans. No other animals do these things. So domestication has affected human evolution and development, as well as us affecting the evolution and development of dogs. Domestic dogs were incredibly beneficial, most likely, for early humans. They wouldn't have hung out with hunting animals otherwise. If we think about it, there would have been a competitive relationship possibly there. So there had to have been great benefits for early humans who aligned with dogs. And domestic animals probably provided us, and still provide us, with skills that we don't have. So we only have to think of modern functions of dogs in terms of scent detection, for example. There are skills that we don't have as humans, but we can harness in dogs and even selectively breed to improve. So domestication of dogs really paved the way for us domesticating other species of animals, and a little bit later on, plants. The study of canine cognition has really come to the forefront in the last decade or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, but certainly we are seeing more and more canine cognition labs cropping up in different research institutions, and the results that we're getting from there, the works that we're seeing from there, are showing that dogs probably have greater abilities in terms of cognition than previously thought. Some of this work has really revealed that possibly dogs evolved these abilities because they were hanging out with humans and because they were spending a lot of time with us, and this benefited them. So through natural selection, they may have developed the ability, for example, to read subtle human communication cues such as pointing or the direction of our gaze. We've also seen that the dog and human relationship is something that can be represented at a neurochemical level, with social bonding hormones or social bonding chemicals being shown to be elevated in both dogs and humans after certain interactions. And where the relationship is stronger and the dog and the person are more bonded, there are greater levels of those bonding chemicals being released. As we study the human-canine relationship going back thousands of years, sometimes tens of thousands of years, we really have seen that it has been shrouded in complexity all the time. And the modern perception of dogs is that they are overwhelmingly beneficial for human health. And certainly that seems to be the popular perception. They seem to be the sort of stories, and seems to be the sort of popular media that is shared. But when we actually look at the research, it's much more mixed. And there are benefits in places, there are disadvantages in places, and oftentimes there are neutral effects shown. So when we actually analyse the research, we'll see that, the idea that dogs might not be always 100% good for us, or sometimes have no real effects on our health, those are stories that aren't really shared. So the popular perception is quite important here, because this is what people believe. But when we work in the training and behaviour industry, we're often meeting people where their dogs are not benefiting them, and therefore both theirs and their dog's welfare is suffering. The problem we have with studying in this area is that we don't really understand the mechanisms to these benefits. So we don't know how, if dogs do have overwhelming benefits for us in some area, for example, decreasing blood pressure in stressful situations, for example, there's shown to be some benefits in that area. Now, some mixed research as well, but certainly some benefits have been shown in that area, and we don't really understand how they do that. Maybe in a mildly stressful situation, having some sort of external point of focus, like a dog or any other pet, perhaps, is something that's going to help you take your mind off whatever that kind of stressful situation is a little bit, and therefore decrease your stress response. But we don't really understand the mechanisms of these benefits, or indeed these disadvantages, for the most part. So we have to consider that dogs present considerable safety risks, for example, or considerable nuisance effects in society when it comes to spreading zoonotic disease, so disease that can be passed from animals to humans. When it comes to trips and falling over animals, and we hear stories, particularly in relation to elderly people, with that, with injuries caused by dog bites, things like that. They are going to have massive effects on society's perception of dogs. So at one level, this popular perception is that dogs are overwhelmingly beneficial, but at another level, society is becoming less and less tolerant of dogs. So there is definitely a mixed bag of perception out there in relation to the human-canine relationship, and that's reflected in the complexity in the history of our relationship, but also the complexity just present in mixed species relationships over huge periods of time. Certainly, one of the things that we really want you to look really hard at here when you're looking at this area is to come up with the ethical questions about our modern relationship with domestic dogs. So, how does our relationship, and specifically with companion dogs, pet dogs, affect their welfare? Why are we keeping them as pet dogs? What do we get out of it? And most importantly, what do they get out of it? When we talk about these overwhelmingly beneficial perceptions to the human-canine relationship, those stories are generally reported from a very much human point of view, and very rarely is the dog's side taken into account. And indeed, in the study of animal welfare science, one of the kind of sparsest areas when it comes to research is that in relation to companion animals. We kind of presume that our pets are experiencing a good standard of welfare at one level, and that obviously makes us feel better about keeping them. They are captive animals, and that's something that we need to be mindful of. So there are many ethical questions that we can ask about our modern relationships, specifically with pet dogs, and that's certainly what we want you to start thinking about from this part of your course. Now it's up to you to really do some critical thinking, and you're asked about classifying the human-canine relationship. So do you think it's amensalistic, where there's no particular effect on one side of the relationship, but possibly negative effects on the other? Is it mutualistic? Do we have a mutualistic relationship with domestic dogs? Is that what's represented in modern society with companion pet dogs? So does everybody benefit? Do both sides of the relationship benefit? Is it a parasitic relationship? Are pet dogs a parasite and we are simply the host, so they benefit more than we do? Or is it a competitive relationship? So are we competing on both sides of the relationship? Are we competing for access to resources? And there is evidence for and against all of these, and I want you to really think about that now when it comes to answering the questions relating to this part of your course of study. So well done for getting this far. You've got through the second part of your course, Canine Behaviour Foundations. Now it's a good time to go and have a look at the Q&A workbook. See, can you complete some of those questions there? I would really also encourage you to watch the linked documentary, The Secret Life of the Dog, for a great summary of our historical and modern human-canine relationship and all the complexity that brings with us. Now, we need to be mindful is that this is a popular show, so critical thinking caps firmly on. It's presented in very much a positive light, but it's a wonderful insight into this long-standing and terribly important relationship. So enjoy that one. Have a look at your Q&A workbook and see how you get on. Best of luck with it.